Color drawing for architects and designers. Design drawing skills and techniques for architects, landscape architects, and interior designers. This video will give practical advice on how to create color drawings for architecture and design. From quick sketches to finished renderings, it's essential for architects and designers to have a variety of techniques for drawing. We can make the distinction between architectural sketches, drawings, and renderings. Sketches are done by architects to quickly explore design ideas. These sketches are usually messy, sometimes ugly, but they allow an architect to iterate many different design ideas quickly and efficiently. Color drawings are done by architects to communicate a formal idea. Color drawings can be anything from quick sketches to highly developed renderings. Renderings are presentation drawings that show proof of concept of an idea. These are done for clients and stakeholders. This video will show practical skills in developing color drawings. Let's get started. Designers need to use color drawings and media in everyday practice to efficiently illustrate their ideas. There is still a need to draw fast, directly, and express ideas authentically without the crutch of computer-aided design. Hand-drawn images are softer, more ambiguous, and creative than computer-generated images. They are more human and express the hand of the designer. The ability to move easily between hand drawing and the computer is an essential skill all architects should have. When determining which media to use for drawings, it's important to know what you are trying to express. Do you want to show line, mass, light and shadow, color, or texture and materials? Different media is better for showing various ideas. A designer should know several different media techniques to best communicate their ideas. Sketching techniques are used to quickly come up with ideas. One can sketch with pencils, pens, watercolors, or markers. Remember all the fun you had drawing as a kid? Well, you can use many of the same media. In fact, playing around with drawing is a key technique for generating ideas. I recommend all designers play and experiment with sketching as a technique for coming up with ideas. When choosing media to draw with, one should ask, what is it you're trying to communicate? Pencils and pens are better for showing line work. Massing is better shown with markers, watercolors, pastels, or oil paint. Paper is an important factor to drawing. Illustrators typically use Bristol board as it is smooth and tough. This is what comic book artists use because it is good for penciling and inking. I use watercolor paper as I do mostly watercolor drawings. Today, photocopying and printing has become ubiquitous, so the ability to draw on this cheap paper is important. Photocopy paper is called bond. It's okay for colored pencil, pastel, and lighter marker, but not suitable for watercolor techniques or mixed media. But I've developed a trick for this. I typically do CAD drawings and then print them out so I can go over them in watercolor. To stop the bond paper from warping, I mount it onto foam core. I use little rolls of trace to sketch out initial ideas. Because trace is cheap and flimsy, made to be thrown away, it stops me from getting too precious about drawing. This allows me to iterate quickly without thinking it's a good drawing or not. An architect I used to know used to call tracing paper bumwad because it was like toilet paper. It's important not to take one's drawings too seriously, as they are just a tool to execute a final design. If I've done a sketch on trace that is particularly important, I sometimes paste it into my sketchbook for future reference. Markers, pastels, and colored pencils on the back of tracing paper appear muted and softer. This is sometimes called the retro color technique. With this technique, dark lines and white highlights are drawn on the front of the trace, while color is applied to the back, giving it a muted effect. Trace over toned paper is also used in architectural offices. It makes drawings appear to be full color when only trace and colored paper is used. Cranston paper, which is typically used for pastels, is a good toned paper and easily found in art stores. Toned paper was also used in traditional watercolor paintings. Historically, J.M.W. Turner used blue-gray watercolor paper and gouache. Toned paper was used extensively in the Renaissance, especially for chalk and pastels. Toned paper created a mid-tone where highlights and dark lines could be pulled from it. Mylar and vellum were used extensively in architectural offices for many years. Architects would draw on translucent paper, like mylar, and would use a diazo machine to run prints. Light is shown through the paper, and where ink or pencil blocked the light would create white lines. This is done through a chemical process using ammonia. The paper would come in two colors, blue and sepia. Blue was mostly used, and this is where we get the term blueprint from. Architects would use dark blue of the blueprint for renderings, and use colored pencil or pastels to pull out the highlights. Architects traditionally use 2H pencils to draw because they're hard enough to draft with, but also soft enough to sketch with. There's a whole range of hardnesses from 9H to 9B. I use 2H pencils for most drawings. Softer pencils like HB are used for art or for very rough sketching. In the olden days of hand drafting, hard leads were used for light construction lines. 2H leads were used mostly for drafting, and softer leads were used for sketching and art. HB was considered the optimal hardness for most types of drawings. Architects typically sketch with fountain pens. This allows a hard line, but also to vary the width of the line. The sign pen is another popular sketching pen for architects. This allows to vary a line from very thin to very thick. It's called a sign pen because it was typically used for lettering, similar to a calligraphy pen. In the olden days, architects used rapidograph pens for drafting. Micron pens are almost as good and far easier to use because you don't have to clean them. These pens are primarily used for drafting as the line width is fixed. Many architects use colored pencils. Frank Lloyd Wright used them extensively, as did Carlo Scarpa. Lebbeus Woods used colored pencils extensively in his renderings. Often colored pencil is combined with other media, like markers or watercolors, as an accent color. Prismacolor pencils are the best for use over markers. Various water-based media can be used like tempera paint, designer's gouache, and acrylics, but the most used is watercolor. Historically, in the 1800s, British and French architects would use watercolors in their work. I was deeply influenced by the British watercolorists like J.M.W. Turner or John Sell Cotman. I like using watercolors because they can be used in architectural design, but I can also use them as an art medium. Watercolors are quick and easy, so they make the perfect medium for designers who have limited time. I use color to represent materials, while also showing how light interacts with an object. Other famous architects who use watercolor include Stephen Hall and Santiago Calatrava. Stephen Hall maintains a daily practice of watercolor sketching. Gouache is water-soluble, similar to watercolors, yet uses chalk or clay that makes it opaque. Gouache was used by illustrators to get exact colors for printing. Watercolors were often too light for the printing process. Gouache is often used as a highlight or accent color over watercolors or markers. In the 1960s and 70s, gouache was the main medium for architectural rendering. These paintings look dated now because it's not used for architectural renderings anymore, but was very popular for many years. Many architects and designers use markers. They were big in the 1980s and 1990s before Photoshop and computer-aided modeling. Like watercolors, they are quick and easy. Quick marker sketches were popular in industrial design and automotive design. Now computer sketching programs can easily simulate marker techniques. But for quick gestural lines, markers are still a good option. Pastels are the fastest and most direct color media. They're great for massing or large areas of color like skies or vegetation. They are messy and a bit difficult to get a crisp line, so I don't use them much, but they were very popular in architectural offices in the 1980s and 1990s. Lebbeus Woods used pastels over his pencil drawings to get clouds or large areas of soft color. The first and quickest technique architects and designers should use are thumbnail sketches. Thumbnail sketches is a technique to get ideas down quickly. They push the designer to condense a concept into just what is needed. They also encourage iterating on a concept and making many small drawings to work out an idea. I've been using little mini cards from Japan for many years. When I'm working out a design, I generally start with the thumbnail sketches, iterating quickly. The good ideas I paste into my sketchbooks so I don't lose them. Working in a sketchbook is a great way to design and organize your ideas. You can use notebooks for many things like travel sketches, observation of objects, diagrams, or meeting notes. Lots of architects use sketchbooks, from Le Corbusier to Calatrava. Hertzberger's books, Notations of Hermann Hertzberger, is an excellent introduction on how to use sketchbooks to generate and document ideas. He calls them intellectual diaries and uses them as an essential tool in his design process. For me, the size of a sketchbook limits what I can draw, forcing me to come up with an idea quickly and precisely. The added benefit is the notebook is a great storage for medium to keep one's ideas in one place. I carry around a sketchbook that is A5, which I think is the perfect size. Not too big that it can't fit in a small bag, but not too small for most types of sketches. Like thumbnails, a sketchbook encourages many pages to iterate ideas. Before jumping into purely architectural drawings, which limits one's ideas, using art techniques to loosen up and experiment is an important part of the design process. For me, I went through many phases before settling on watercolor for my art technique. I tried oil paint, pastels, egg tempera, crayons, markers, and other techniques. In architecture, we often just focus on drawing lines on a piece of paper. AutoCAD and manual drafting forces architects to just draw lines and creates bad architecture. Art techniques open a world of possibilities. Trace lets architects iterate quickly, drawing over and over again on the same sketch or diagram. Trace frees up architects and designers to focus on ideas instead of precious drawings. When I was in architecture school, teachers would tell us not to make beautiful drawings. Design drawings should be messy. They're to get one's idea down efficiently and iterate quickly. This is one of the reasons to use tracing paper. There are many different types of drawings an architect must master. These can be broadly grouped into three types: observational, analysis, and design. Architects use drawing to research, analyze, and problem solve. Observational drawings are based on seeing and recording one's observations. This is drawing from life. One sees colors, forms, masses, and other visual elements. But you draw not only what you see, but what your emotional or intellectual response is to it. This is your subjective experience, and everyone experiences the world differently based on their unique perspective. Analytical drawing is often symbolic and studies relationships, structures, and underlying phenomena that make up visual form. Often architects use diagrams to study formal relationships. One diagram often used in architecture is the adjacency diagram. Here, different functional uses are drawn and relationships between the functional parts identified. Rooms that have a functional relationship to each other are identified and drawn adjacent to each other. Relationships can be further identified by using dotted lines or solid lines, colors, and shapes. Architects often use tracing paper for diagrams, as one diagram can be overlaid over another, creating complex analysis of formal relationships. Multiple iterations can be developed, one over another. Renderings are more developed drawings and often show color, light and shadow, and materiality. Most people think of perspective drawings for renderings, but any type of drawing can be rendered. I like rendering sections and floor plans to show light and shadow and materials. In the design phase, architects use standard drawing types: floor plans, elevations, sections, perspectives, reflected ceiling plans, and axonometrics. By drawing these traditional views, an architect or interior designer can design the whole project, view by view. Coloring these standard views gives a whole level of realism in life that is missing from simple line work. Drawing construction details is one skill every architect should know. Architects should have the technical knowledge to put a building together and to know what all the parts and pieces are and how they come together. Details are where I use trace the most. Although many architects use black and white drawings, I like to show details in color. Sometimes I show the cut lines with an accent color. Other times I use colors to represent materials. Traditional architects would use ink wash to show accent color. Often architects are using existing building materials or existing details and modifying them for a specific condition. This is another reason to use trace. One can go back over existing details and iterate new ones quickly. I use a fountain pen on trace, but a pencil or felt pen works too. On the back of tracing paper, I use marker to color in the detail. This is called retrocolor technique. The trick to working quickly as an architect is to iterate first on trace, then on the computer. Jumping directly on the computer slows down the design process and produces bad designs. There are many other transfer techniques for drawings. One can use a light table if the paper is translucent. Projectors were used a lot in the 1990s for transferring drawings. Architects often use photocopiers to reproduce their line drawings, then go over them with colored media. Lebbeus Woods uses this technique a lot in his work. This could be called a mixed media technique or even a collage. For my watercolors, if I'm trying to get a hard architectural line, I'll use transfer paper or rub graphite from a pencil on the back of trace, then trace over the lines again with a pencil, transferring the drawing from trace to watercolor paper. Color drawings are part of the work process, a technique to communicate ideas to clients and stakeholders. There are a few rules to color architectural drawings. I'm showing my drawing technique as a possible example, but you should develop your own style and techniques. Keep those drawings. Who knows, you too may become a starchitect someday. Why color renderings? There are several reasons to hand draw architectural renderings. First is to show the design is a work in progress. Often when you show a photorealistic rendering to a client, they think the design is finished and no more development is needed. Hand drawings are more forgiving, and clients understand they can still make changes to the design. Secondly, photorealistic renderings don't allow for abstraction and artistic interpretation. It's often important to evoke a feeling without having a photorealistic rendering. Architects do renderings to communicate ideas to their clients. Often photorealistic renderings don't communicate much. They're just pretty pictures. Lastly, renderings by hand are always more creative than Photoshop collages. Most renderings all look the same. Having a unique rendering style all your own means you are not competing with thousands of architects who all use the same software to do the same boring renderings. You stand out by having your own style. Color for architectural design is different than for painting or illustration. Color is used for design of materials, textures, forms, and paint schemes. The palette of building materials limit the use of color to real things. Light and shadow are also indicated by color drawings. I typically use neutral gray for concrete, yellow ochre and sepia for wood, blue for glass, and blue-gray for steel. What role does color play in composition? Contrasting colors can be used as a compositional tool. Some of the contrasting colors can be warm-cool contrast. Here, warm colors are contrasted with cool ones. The eye is drawn to the warm colors. Value contrast is used often in architectural drawings. Value is the lightness or darkness in a drawing. Chroma is used often to create contrast. Chroma is the saturation or intensity of a color from very bright to muted and gray. Color can also be used to unify a composition. Decreased contrast value, or chroma, can be used to unify a drawing. An example of this is Andrew Wyeth, where he uses a very muted chroma range in his paintings. If you take a close look, he's using many bright colors, but if you stand back, the colors are muted and almost appear like a black and white photograph. The quick way to develop an oil painting for architecture and design is to first draw it out on paper. Pencil or pen or any other drawing technique can be used. It doesn't matter because you won't see the underdrawing. Once a rough sketch is complete, the paper needs to be sealed so the oil doesn't sink into the paper. I use transparent acrylics like matte medium, or shown here, clear gesso. Transparent gesso has a sandy texture, so it's good for pastel or other media. Here I'm using oil paint to come up with a more impressionistic rendering. There are several ways to render windows, from making them black holes, to reflecting bright light, or showing and concealing interiors. Andrew Wyeth has done hundreds of watercolors showing windows. There is something anthropomorphic about his windows, like the eyes of a building. They reveal and hide interior dimensions at the same time. In this way, they can be quite expressive and used as a metaphor to communicate deeper meaning. Trees and various types of vegetation can be used in renderings. This softens the building to some degree and places it in a natural context. A building just doesn't float in space, but exists on a specific site. Vegetation can show how the building interacts with natural elements. Entourage in architectural drawings are people, cars, trees, plants, or interior design elements like furniture. Figures in drawings add scale to the image and suggest how people inhabit a space. There used to be many entourage books on the market and resources available for architectural illustration. As computers came into widespread use, these books mostly disappeared. Now computer renderings use photorealistic entourage people cut out from photos. Although every drawing is different, here's a step-by-step process for developing an architectural drawing. Line is very important in architectural drawings as modern architecture focuses on line over other design elements like mass, value, and color. Line drawings can be done in pencil, pen, or drafted on the computer. The next step is to determine what level of finish the drawing should have. Is it a diagram, a simple sketch, or is it a fully rendered presentation? Architects and interior designers are usually trying to design space. There are many techniques for creating space in a drawing. 1, 2, and 3-point perspective is commonly used. Overlapping elements in a drawing makes it appear that some are closer and some are further away. Aerial perspective is the use of warm colors in the foreground and cool colors in the background. Leonardo da Vinci was the first to describe this phenomena. It occurs because air gives a bluish tint to light, and the further away an object is in space, the more cool is the color. Architectural drawing uses tracing paper, photographs, and entourage elements, layering them into a composition. This was originally done through drawing and tracing, but now with Photoshop, layering is done with photos and photorealistic models. Value, or chiaroscuro, is the distribution of light and dark in a drawing. What are the darkest darks and the lightest lights in a drawing? This is used as a compositional tool to lead the eye. My favorite artwork using chiaroscuro is actually a sculpture by Rodin called The Gates of Hell. The composition is designed using light and shadow. After establishing a drawing on trace or some other paper, it's often transferred to the final paper. I use either graphite paper or the transfer technique of rubbing a soft pencil on the back. Then the whole drawing is transferred onto the final paper. Paper is chosen to best work with the medium used. I typically use watercolors, so I use hot press watercolor paper. Fabriano is my favorite, but I also use Arches. Hot press is better for illustration and subtle line work, as it has no texture. Fabriano paper was used by Michelangelo and Raphael. This is the most fun step, coloring in the drawing. It is the adult version of coloring in a coloring book. Here, one can get creative with whatever medium is used. It's important to always experiment and have fun. I'm always trying out new media to play with. Scanning or photographing a drawing is an important step. Smaller drawings can be scanned on a flatbed scanner. There are many cheap scanners that cost between $100 and $300. The other issue with scanners is the light source is too close to the drawing, so it actually goes through watercolor, acrylic, and oil paint without properly capturing the color. This means colors and values are almost always off and need to be retouched in Photoshop. I usually scan at 3 resolutions: 300 dpi, 600 dpi, and 1200 dpi. 300 dpi is for normal usage. 600 dpi is for print in books and magazines. 1200 dpi is for art posters and prints. For larger works, oil paintings, or other semi-transparent media, photos should be taken with a real camera. Lighting is important, and even light from both sides of the painting should be used. After scanning a drawing, it's always necessary to put it into a program like Lightroom or Photoshop. Color, value, and hues are always off based on the scanner, photograph, or computer used. it's necessary to use a color-accurate monitor for color correction. Color matching is an art in itself. A basic understanding of color theory and computer colors is needed to accurately reproduce color from a drawing. The final step is to use the drawing in a presentation. This is often presentation boards for architectural competitions or for client presentation boards. Portfolios or other bound books are also used. The program typically used for this is Adobe InDesign, but there are a lot of publishing programs that work too. I hope this video helped introduce you to color sketching and rendering techniques for architecture. Hopefully, you'll be encouraged to go out and draw. I think it's still important to maintain a practice of sketching, keeping a notebook, and idea generation using more creative media. Architects will always need to ideate, iterate, and develop visual ideas through drawing. Here are the books I drew inspiration from for this video. Most are out of print, but maybe you could find them in a used bookstore, or perhaps a similar book. For architectural sketching, I suggest looking at Stephen Hall, Santiago Calatrava, Zaha Hadid, and Lebbeus Woods. If you know a good resource for color drawing, please put it in the comments below. In the description section, I've put a link to some of my other drawing videos. If you are interested in drawing, check them out. What do you think? Is drawing still a fundamental design tool for architects? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Jamie Roberts. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.